Hello, welcome.
Hello, thank you.
It's nice
Hello.
so many people that
Hello,
are
Ms.
interested.
Mark. Hello.
I'm glad to see so many ESS teachers present.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We'll give it still a few minutes until the time for it to start. I'm just gonna post some links. Okay, I've posted a few links in the chat, and I see a bunch of people are already starting to introduce themselves. That's absolutely wonderful. I'm glad. You guys can continue a conversation in the chats. The links I've shared with you are to some collaborative Google documents and a collaborative archival website called Wakelet, which I'm using as a free alternative to Padlet. So maybe also through this session today, you guys might get introduced to some more online educational tools. So I'm hoping that this will be a fruitful conversation we have, and maybe I can introduce you guys to some more tools that you haven't had before. All right, I'm going to give it just one more minute and then we can begin. And I see some familiar names in the list. That's nice to see. Hi, Michael. What I'm going to do is ask for a little help from some team members here because I'm going to be sharing a presentation. I'm hoping that some of you can monitor the chat and maybe point out questions if they come up, and also maybe reshare the links I've shared with all of you, so that way anybody that enters after I've posted those links will have access to the resources that I've shared. All right, so I want to just start this and preface this session to the fact that I'm not here to teach you guys. I'm here to open a discussion. These are now being called IB Educator Chats, so that all of us can share our knowledge and ask our questions and try to help and support each other. I will share a little bit of information with you guys about my approach, but really I want to have this, broader discussion and come up with some resources and some ideas as to an approach on how we do things. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so those of you, well, you should all be on digital devices, but if you're able to see my screen, then what you'll see is that there's a presentation launching on a Google Slide add-on called Pear Deck, and it's going to give you a website that you can go to so you can actually join this PowerPoint presentation, and it's actually an interactive presentation. So if you go to this website here, joinpd.com, and you type in these 5 letters as the code, is going to help you access the presentation that I've created and allow you guys from your laptops to actually contribute your thoughts and ideas right on there. So you can go ahead and can you guys just confirm for me, are you able to see the access code?
Yes, I can see it.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
beautiful. Just wanted to make sure that that was working well. So as we get a few more people coming in, I'll wait and leave this up. So don't feel like you have to, especially if your internet connection is not so great, but I love to have interactive sessions. So this will give you the opportunity to actually comment right on there. I think it'll be a little easier to follow than the chat in the Zoom window. And sorry about my assistant back there moving around. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get started with this. I see 12 people have already gotten on, great. Again, you don't feel like you have to, but if you wanna get on and add your comments and thoughts directly onto the presentation as we go through, that would be wonderful. So this session is about the practical scheme of work in the Environmental Systems and Societies course. And it's really a way for us to talk about what kind of practical activities we do in teaching the content. I come from a background of project-based and problem-solving based learning, where I very seldom do PowerPoints or presentations for my students. I consider myself more of a facilitator or a coach, and then I provide activities for my students where they are engaging in guided inquiry for the different topics that we're looking at. And then what I do is I go through with them to check for understanding and misconceptions and such. And so because of that, I really wanted to find out how many other teachers are using this approach. So again, this is the link for the collaborative Wakelet that I've created, and I've already posted most of my PSOW resources, and each of them is under the different topics for ESS. This is also linked in the chat for those of you who are not accessing this particular presentation. And so I thought it would be helpful for you guys to know a little bit about me. I am an IB ESS teacher, but in addition, at my current school, I'm the MYP coordinator. I'm the service action in the MYP coordinator, and I am the CAS coordinator as well. So I wear many hats. I've been in education. I'm now completing my 19th year as a teacher. I came to this from a background of field biology, where I spent 9.5 years doing field research on dolphins and manatees. So I know a lot about how to do field data collection and apply it to answering questions. So it was kind of fun coming into teaching, being able to use my experiences as a wildlife biologist and sharing the experiences that I've had and case studies that I've experienced with my students. Also, before this pandemic, I would a couple times a year get up to one of the major national parks here in Ghana, where I have my own elephant research project, where I'm documenting the social affiliations and behavior of male elephants in the tourism areas. So, you know, that's just a little bit about my background. I've been doing the IB for a very long time. I've on and off, depending upon what school I've been teaching at. I've been doing the IB for about 17 years now. And I teach, I've taught at several international schools. This is the 7th country I've lived in. And while this is the 3rd school I'm teaching at in Ghana, I've been in Ghana for 7 years. So I have a little bit of commitment to this country and to the students here in this country. All right, so this is the first interactive slide. And so those of you that are on the slide presentation, then what you can do is use the text box there and put in some of your responses and kind of questions that you have about today's topic. For those of you who have just joined this session, if you go online, join PD, that's JOIN. PD. You can type in this code and you will have access to this presentation that you can use for Okay, I also would like to request that if you guys are not actually planning to speak right now, if you could mute your microphones because we are getting some background noise.
ये इसका भी कुत्ता पीछे बैठा हुआ है इसके कोई सेशन ले रहा है उसके डॉगी उसके ऊपर बैठा हुआ है सो
Okay, let's have a look at some of the responses to this. Oops, sorry, I'm having a little trouble accessing it because it's hidden. There, let's move the toolbar up here. So we can scroll through and look at what some of our colleagues are saying. Okay, some great questions coming up that I hope we will be able to have a great discussion on. I'll give you another minute to type any responses that you want to type to this particular one. For those of you that have just entered, if you want to be able to post your thoughts and comments on the presentation, go to joinpd.com, JOINPD.com, and type in this code that you see up here in my upper right corner. That will give you access to this interactive presentation I've got. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and continue on. Hi guys, I'm not sure why I got kicked out. This happens to me once every other day. I don't know who was made the host, but if you guys could give me back hosting permissions, that would be great.
Miss Barb, you're still the host, I think.
I am?
yeah you're the host. Yeah, you're the host.
Okay, Great. Thank you for letting me know that. Sorry about that. Strange things happen. All right, let me get back onto the presentation. All right, can we see that again? All right. For those of you who were wondering about the code for the joinpd.com, it's PGIUE, all lowercase. So what I was saying before I got kicked off of Zoom is that I'm an MYP teacher, so I like to put things into the context of MYP. And I've created a statement of inquiry for our session for today. And so the statement is that use of the PSOW and inquiry activities reinforce ESS students' understanding of ESS knowledge, understanding, applications, and skills. And I've also developed 3 questions that we can consider, 3 inquiry questions that we can consider for the rest of this session. So a debatable question is, should we use PSOW and inquiry activities to teach ESS? A conceptual question, how can we ensure students are learning required content from inquiry activities? And a factual question, what are great inquiry activities we can use to teach our students? And I always like to start the year of my class with a video of a comedy routine from the comedian George Carlin, who passed away in 2006. He did a routine in 1994, which is still relevant today, called The Planet is Fine. You can find it on YouTube. I haven't actually shared that resource with you guys yet, but I can put it in the resource folder. And I just love this quote from him. My kids get a big kick out of the fact that I play, the very first thing I do is air a video that's got swear words in it, but it does get them to think critically about the course as a way for us to start. So our first question that I really want us to open to discussion verbally, not just in writing, is should we use PSOW and inquiry to teach ESS? Or really a better question would probably be, to what extent should we use PSOW and inquiry to teach ESS? So I'm going to do 2 things right now. I have a little drag and dot thing. So if you guys want to grab the dot, and then you can place it on if you agree with the statement or disagree with the statement. So you can go ahead and do that, and we can take a look at that. And now what I'd actually like is for some people to actually share what their thoughts are. So if there's anybody who would like to talk, I'd love to hear from you guys on your thoughts about this. I don't see any raised hands, or I see a microphone came on from Gemma.
I'm not sure that you can teach the ESS content primarily through practical and inquiry. I think there's some elements of it that you need to show real life context and videos and what things look like in different places. And I don't know whether or not we can do all of that just through one medium.
Okay.
I'm sitting literally directly in the middle between agree and disagree.
That's good to know. Right.
I agree with that one, where I put mine just there, because I think videos and then contextualize that video to whatever you are doing in class, also kind of concrete. Yeah.
Even I agree with PSOW and the teacher who spoke earlier, because I've been teaching ESS just for a few months because my teacher was sick. But I can see that because I'm an empowered teacher, I can see that I can have a few talks in inquiry, but not everything, because there is a lot of to cover. Yeah, so we can do inquiry based activity, not that we can't, but everything through inquiry looks a little difficult with the time factor, time management factor.
Yeah, I can understand that. All right, so I have another interactive slide for you guys, and this time you can type in your responses or I think some of you might even have a write palette that you can use if you're on a tablet device or something. So again, it's not that ESS is only taught through inquiry and PSOW, but mainly taught through inquiry and PSOW versus the other ones. And I'd love to see you guys add some ideas as to arguments for that idea and against that idea, or challenges that you see with that. So again, while some teachers are typing, I would love to hear from more of you, your thoughts on this argument about using more inquiry versus more video and text and class discussions.
Hello, I love that ESS is going to be inquiry based, but still I want everybody to get a 7. Everybody wants high grades for their kids, so I want the content to be a little bit guided at times. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Gemma, did you want to say something? I saw your microphone had been turned on.
Yeah, hi. I disagree with that. I think that in order to push students to get a 7, especially if we're looking at synthesizing their knowledge and understanding for those Part B questions in paper 2, that we've got to do inquiry-based learning, because you need to be able to actually connect different aspects of the course together to look at how it's all connected as a whole, like through the Gaia hypothesis and looking at all those different things. So you can't just do content, because otherwise you're robbing is not the right word, but you're not giving that opportunity for students to really explore the connections between different elements of the course, but also explore alternative perspectives, and then how does that inform their own EVS and their perspective on that as well. So you can't do that only through videos and text.
I think it depends on the time that you're taking the course in. If it's for 2 years, then you're given that privilege. But if you're given it for just 1 year, then maybe you're running out of time if you do inquiry based the entire time.
How many times a week, or how many hours a week does your class meet for this once a year ESS course, Rowita? Am I pronouncing that right?
Yes, you are. It's just 3 times a week.
For how long each class period?
About 45 minutes.
Wow. So you really are in kind of a tight schedule there. Do you guys even meet the minimum requirement of hours?
Yes, we do. Yes, but we basically run through things sometimes. So inquiry-based is a joy to everyone, to us teachers and to students, but sometimes we just can't afford it.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Time can definitely play a big factor in how we want to approach things. Hatis, I think you've been raising your hand. You want to unmute your microphone?
Yeah, thank you so much. I was going to answer the last question you asked as well, but it applies here for me as well. I'm teaching ESS for the first time, so I also have English language learners. So I would love to teach more inquiry-based lessons where I have discussions with students and have them explore things via, talking to me about what they think. But oftentimes they have a very difficult time trying to express themselves in the English language. So I have to depend on the videos, the case studies, the lectures a lot more, so then having them be involved in the lessons more than they are at this point. And again, since it's my first year teaching ESS, it's like I'm trying to figure out, how do I balance all of those things? How do I do these labs and have them do most of the work rather than me guiding them all the time?
It's a good point that you bring up. One of the things that I do with my students, especially when they're first doing labs, like our 4th unit, and that sounds like a lot, but it was still during the first semester, we were looking at the CO2 impacts on temperature. And so we were doing a model simulation where we were collecting temperatures in a CO2 enhanced environment in plastic bottles versus one without the addition of CO2 added versus ones with additional moisture in it. And what I did was I basically talked my students through it, but then I let them do the results discussion and analysis on their own. So we kind of talked about the planning of the lab and the variables together, and we did all that brainstorming. We collected the data together. We talked about, we evaluated the first time we did the lab together because they made a lot of mistakes by not reading through the instructions prior to doing the lab. And so it took them way too long and they made a lot of errors. So we discussed and evaluated, and then they went back and redid the lab again, and there was a vast improvement in what they did. So I think sometimes with the early investigations and practical scheme that we do, if we do them with us modeling and guiding them along the way, that we can lead to more independence later on in the year when we do some of these activities. All right, Nisha, I see that you've had your hand up for a little while, if you'd like to speak.
Yeah, ma'am. I'm from India. Actually, I'm not a ESS teacher. I'm a Hindi teacher, Hindi language. I felt like any subject without inquiring, we cannot run through. Just starting from the topic, I should ask the students what is their pre-acquired knowledge.
Okay, Nisha, you're going in and out. Nisha, we can't hear you anymore. All right, we would love to hear what you have to say. Maybe what you could do is type what you wanted to say into the chat box. And if you come back on, that's great. But in the meantime, maybe Anjana, you can say what you wanted to say.
Hi, I'm Anjana from India. I've been teaching ESS for about 5 years now. This is my 6th cohort. My idea is, am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you. That's fine.
Okay. Yeah. What I feel inquiry-based learning can be an excellent tool to get students a hang of what is required for the IA, but to make them prepared for their written assessments or basically paper 2, we need to do a lot of guided work, because then they get an idea about how they're supposed to structure their answers, what all relevant examples can be included. So little bit of working in groups, but then also exchanging ideas with each other so that they can learn from one another and put their answers in the format that is required. So that is something that gives them an edge over everything. So I feel a mix of both helps a lot in doing ESS. All I mean to say is doing inquiry-based learning as well as guided teaching. So I feel, yes, as you said, initially you have to do a lot of hand holding when you're trying to train them for their IAs, trying to give them an idea about how things can be changed, what variables can be taken, let them have the freedom of broadening the way they can think. So this is all I wanted to say.
Right, thank you. All right. So why don't this discussion can still remain open, but let's talk about now how we can ensure that the students are learning the required content when we do inquiry activities, because I think this was a concern that several teachers had raised, that they're worried that the content won't get covered and that the students won't really understand just if we do inquiry activities, or if that is a big focus on what we're doing. So again, I would love for some of you that are on the Pear Deck presentation to share in writing your strategies that you would suggest, and otherwise opening up for the microphone for teachers that would like to share. So before you guys do, one of the things that I do when I'm doing these inquiry activities with the kids, I always have my instructions for them. I always use IB command terms. So the kids are very familiar with the use of the command terms and know the expectations of what I want them to do. I always have a critical thinking and application component to some, well, I shouldn't say always, but many times in the activities that I'm doing, there's a critical thinking component and an application component. And what I will do is put in questions there again, using IB command terms and in the style of a question that they might actually see on an IB exam. And as the students are working through the inquiries, I always have them use Google Docs and to write their responses on a Google Doc. Even if I'm going to have them do a presentation, an infographic, or present in some other way, all notes and initial answers have to go on a Google Doc. And then I can follow along and make comments and ask follow-up questions to the kids to get them to think deeper as I'm watching what it is that they're doing. All right, would anybody else like to add thoughts and ideas about strategies they use? I don't see any hands up. Let's see if anybody's typing on the window. Okay.
Hi, Barb.
Yeah.
Hello?
Okay, was that
Hi.
Dan?
Yeah, sorry, just linking on the command terms, I find that's the biggest struggle that ESS students often have, especially when it comes to paper 1, the difference between describe and explain. So something I get the students to do is, if I give them a case study or a documentary to watch, I'll give them the 3 different levels of command terms, and they have to, as a group, then come up with 3 types of questions, but also create the mark scheme, and then get them to move around the classroom and answer the command term. So it gets them to really think about what is being asked and how to approach the answer, which I find works very effectively, and it doesn't require much effort from your side, which is always nice.
That's great. And I love how you have them create a mark scheme as well. That's a really wonderful addition to that. All right, Hatice, you wanted to share something?
What I've been doing with my students, I have a very small group, so it makes it a little bit easier, but oftentimes when we have time in the class, in the lesson time, I'll give them the resource booklet and I'll have them get used to using the resource booklet properly to answer the questions on paper 1 and 2. You know, using their time management skills a lot better is very important, because again, they're ELL students, so they often lose a lot of time trying to think about what they should write for these paper 2 questions. So it's important for them to get the skills to use maximum time efficiently for them at this point. Yeah, thank you.
Wow, that's great. All right, does somebody else want to share verbally what it is that you're doing? Ashika?
So I've been looking at different teachers who have already made their Google Sites and Weebly, and I have been looking at their resources, what kind of things they are using. I find that giving a worksheet which has all the assessment statements or the terms, you know, these are the so I pick up some worksheets like that and I share it with them. I tell them that as you are going through the lessons and as you are understanding what is being taught in class and as you are finding out information, I would want you to fill in this, because if you make your own notes, it is easier to remember and write for your exams. So I do that with my students.
Yeah, that's really good. Having the kids doing their own notes is very, very helpful. And I do want to say that it's not that I don't ever do presentations or have class discussions. I do, because my students kind of demand it. They are so used to a certain way of approaching learning that I have to kind of meet them halfway. But I'm also finding that for every unit that I do, for those of you that either saw my stuff on the Facebook ESSpedia group, or if you've started looking through the resources I've posted here on the Wakelet, my scope and sequence is based around case studies. And some of them are heavier in one topic area than another, but all of them have links to different subtopics within it. So it's not just I'm teaching an energy unit, or I'm teaching a pollution unit, or I'm teaching a water unit. So when I do that, I look at what kind of activities I can do that will reinforce the way my students are learning. So what are the type of inquiry activities that are going to do the bulk of the teaching and learning for the kids, that will then be reinforced through some recorded presentations I'm doing now that we're online, or through discussions, just so I can find out where some of the misconceptions are. Of course, I use Cognity with my kids, but I use that as their prep work for any unit that we're going to be starting. So I know we need to do all of these other things as well, but I also find that the inquiry activities, as long as what you do is you link subject or the subject guide knowledge statements and or applications and skills into it, that can actually help guide the students to what it is they're learning in the activities. All right, does anybody else have anything they want to contribute to this part of the discussion? And just so you guys know, all of the stuff and all of the things that people are putting on the presentation is going to be shared with everybody through the Wakelet at the end. All right, so now I think this is what a lot of people have been waiting for, is this part. And what are some of the great activities that you use that for inquiry or PSOW that you use to teach your kids the ESS content? So does anybody have something that they want to share?
Bob, can I go?
Yes, please go. I'm going to stop sharing. If any of you actually have any of your things that you want to share on the screen, go ahead. But yes, you can go ahead now.
So what I did for the global warming perspectives is I assigned all my students, since again, we were a small batch, so it was easy to facilitate this, but I assigned everyone a particular personality, like ranging from Al Gore to Leonardo DiCaprio to Trump, to Narendra Modi, and I told them to research what their views were with respect to global warming and the current climate crisis. And then we had a sort of discussion and everybody putting their views on the table and, you know, kind of getting different perspectives towards global warming and the current climate crisis. So yeah, that was quite good.
I love role plays. I really do. I use a couple of them throughout the 2-year period with my students. Anjana, you wanted to say something also?
Yes, I generally tend to do this small lab activity with them where we take small PET bottles with certain amount of water, and then we add any anti-acid to it and cork it immediately and put it to a certain distance from a table lamp, and then see the temperature change after piercing a hole right in the top and the lid of the bottle. And then we can see the, of course, repeating the trials, it helps us to check the change in temperature that's happening. So a very small way of showing how carbon dioxide emissions lead to a higher temperature in the atmosphere and how it is causing global warming. So with different independent variables, by changing, sometimes by changing the distance or by increasing the amount of time to which that bottle is exposed to the table lamp, we tend to just play around with things. This is something we've done, and that's something interesting, I find.
That's great. Do you have your kids hypothesize before they actually begin the experiments?
Yes, we do that.
Great. Does anybody else have something they want to share?
I did a lab with my students relating the albedo effect to global warming. So it wasn't a very detailed lab, but they had to design a method in which they would take, soda cans, just simply wrap them up in dark colored paper, light colored paper, and see the effect that those would have on the temperature collecting inside of the can itself. So we used temperature sensors in this lab. My school is lucky enough to have lab quests that we finally bought in. And so we used those things. So it was good. It was a bridge between the technology and having them use these sensors and be able to do this inquiry lab at the same time, where they did make their hypothesis beforehand as well.
Oh, great. And there's some really good simulations online for that as well. I actually do a daisy world simulation with my kids where they try and manipulate different factors to see how black and white daisies will grow or die off on a planet, based upon albedo effect and things like that. So having the physical, I do the physical lab, and then I have them do a simulation as well to help reinforce some of the ideas. Annie, did you want to say something? I saw you physically raise your hand. Go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. One of the things that I do for a discussion is I teach that when we're talking about, unfortunately, I would be doing it right now if we were in school, but we have our students look at the different ways that you design a protected location, like a national park or something like that. And then we just talk about the basic kind of rules, I guess, around that for 15 minutes in class lecture, and they take notes. And then after that, I separate them into about 4 different groups, and I just give them a giant piece of paper and just say, design a protected area to protect whatever species you want, whatever location you want, any biome you want, whatever you want it to be, but it has to make money. It has to be able to protect the species. I can't remember all the other rules that I give them. It's like 3 or 4 rules. And then they're like, well, what's the right answer? And I tell them, the right answer is whatever you want it to be. It's not about the answer that you're giving. It's about the thought processes that you're going through while you're making this go on. So this is one of the non-lab things that I really like to do, where the kids hate me for about 15 minutes because there is no right answer. But then once we get into the discussion, they're learning so much. And kids, you know, if they miss that class day, they're just totally distraught afterwards. They're like, how do I learn this? I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. I'm hoping that some of you that are sharing these ideas with us are going to add your ideas to the Wakelet's collaborative website. I'd love to see some of the resources that you guys are using and then modify some of the ones that I do. I do something similar, but not quite as extensive as you do, Annie. I actually have a map of a Thai national park, and then I have the kids think about things and ways to develop the park to make it better. And I've actually shared the resources for that on the Wakelet. But I'd love to see what you do and see how I can improve upon the activity that I've done with my students. Who else would?
It takes about an hour.
Anybody else have any great activities that you use for teaching the content through inquiry?
Sorry, something I used with online that might be useful for people is Flipgrid. We were focusing on vegetarian diet and whether that's sustainable. So I actually got the teachers to post their viewpoints on it and gave them kind of guidelines as to how to approach that. And then the students had to watch the teacher's Flipgrid and give them feedback on it. So it was a really good way for them to gather evidence, but in a more alive kind of environment because they were tired. But Flipgrid worked really well.
That's excellent. Do any of you guys know Parlay? Lenny Dutton, who's the one who set up these IB Educator chats, put me onto it, and it's a really amazing resource. Are any of you familiar with it? It's an online roundtable.
Yes.
Now, I have one challenge in that in my ESS class, I only have 3 students. It's a very small class. So sometimes it's a little hard to get the discussions going, but I think that it works really well with slightly larger or even larger classes to give kids a chance to talk about things. And I love the way that they design the way that you can put the lessons together. I'm trying to see if I can get mine up so I can maybe share with you on the screen what an activity looked like that I did with my students. So give me a moment just to, there we go. All right, so when you log into Parlay Roundtable, you can create a new activity. And so here is the activity using their template that I created. So they provide a section for learning goals. And for the learning goals, I look at what the subject guide knowledge and understanding statements are, and I choose the ones that I think the activity is gonna really address. And then I even go as far as providing IB ATL skills that I want the kids to be considering, that's gonna be used to help me in formatively assessing them. And then you get to do the content where you can do the instructions, and you can embed videos in it. You can post links to websites. You can post PDFs onto it. And then what I do is I list my discussion questions for the kids. And again, you'll see I've highlighted the IB command terms. So when the kids are answering, that's how they can approach it. And then I tell the kids specifically what I want them to do in terms of the feedback. And one of the things I wanted to show you in terms of what feedback, so this is one of my star students, and you can see that she really gets into in-depth in writing. But when the kids are going to comment, they actually will, I provide some prompts for them, and they can use these or not, but it's a great way to kind of give the kids an idea of ways of doing this. Because my kids like to pat each other in the back. Oh, I agree with everything you said. You said that, you stated that really well. And then that's where they leave it at. So I'm trying to get them to think a little bit deeper and to discuss a little bit deeper. And I only comment after all my other students have made comments, and then I ask follow-up questions to continue the discussion. So if you haven't seen that before, I think it's a great way to get a lot, especially during this online time, to get people contributing to a discussion without necessarily everybody being in on the Zoom and everybody needing a chance to verbally speak about something. Right. Does anybody have any other activities or resources they want to talk about?
Can I share something which I have really, my students have enjoyed?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, all right. This is about the building a case study. So ideally at the end of first year or second year, you must have done a substantial amount of syllabus. So coming up with a case study, considering the background of the place and the environmental issue, how different organizations have worked together and what kind of activities they've done. So when they build these kind of a lengthy case study, they start connecting with the different aspects of the syllabus. So that that enables them to consider different factors, and that would be the fantastic thing. And my kids have really enjoyed this, and the thinking skills have improved, and they know how everything is connected, and you cannot solve environmental issues in isolation or arbitrarily. So similar to the paper one kind of a case study.
That's great. I'm getting to look at some of the comments in the chat that you guys have done. And Lena, I wanted to respond to one of your things here. You were writing, I agree with inquiries, but for DP, most focus is on the results, and inquiry-based learning costs a lot of time. I would prefer guided. Now, are you familiar with Trevor McKenzie's 4 levels of inquiry? Because an IA is an open inquiry where the kids are responsible for designing the whole thing, choosing the question they want to ask and designing the whole thing. But a lot of the inquiry I do in my class, because I know time restrictions, a lot of it is guided inquiry. So it's not just kind of an open free-for-all where they get to ask their questions and go on, but I'm guiding them based upon the subject guide and the content I want to make sure that gets covered during those sessions. So you can still do inquiry, but make it more of a guided type of inquiry. All right, does somebody else want to have, share any ideas? Rowita, I see you.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yes, well, my kids loved making speeches. So when I'd explain EVS, they would write a speech on anything that they're interested in, and they try to stick to a certain standpoint. And at the end of each speech, we would have a small discussion on how everybody else thinks differently, and then we would tell the different EVSs apart. So, yeah.
That's great.
I do something for EVSs in the first week of school that's a lot of fun. Again, a giant piece of butcher paper, and I have them read the descriptions from the old syllabus for each of the 4 EVSs, and then they just get an idea of what that looks like in their head, and then they have to draw another mural. I love doing murals. I don't do a lot of them. It sounds like I do. They draw another mural of what that looks like in real life. Is it a society that they can draw? Is it a corporation that they can draw, or something like that? And then they'd spend 45 minutes drawing these massive murals, and then we talk about them, and then they stay on the wall the entire year. And we put them up kind of in the order of the scope of how EVSs work. And I find that I never have to teach it again. I'm always just oh, what EVS is this one? And they're all oh, that's the soft ecologist or something. So that's a fun one and really effective.
Yeah. And like you, a lot of my PSOW, a lot of my inquiry stuff is not geared around lab work. We do some lab work because this is a science course. And so we will do things like CO2, we'll look at the effects of acid deposition in the lab. We will, and then we do some simulated lab. We do a lot of online simulation labs. I've put a lot of links to resources for that on one of the documents that I've shared with everybody. But like you say, a lot of the types of things I do are more role play or engagement activities. Like one of the things I do for solid waste subtopic is that I live in Ghana, and so we don't really tend to have mayors and things like that. Our areas are controlled by tribal chiefs. And so I am Chief Barbs of Greenville here in Ghana. And then my students are part of a town council that's set to deal with the problems of our landfill, which is based on a real situation here in Ghana. A landfill was built that was supposed to last for 20 years. And after 7 years, it's somewhere between 7 and 10 years, the thing was completely full. So then I have the kids break into different groups that they're going to be specialists on incineration or recycling or composting or development of new landfills. And then they research that, and we come back together as a town council to talk about it and discuss how we want to do this, taking into account costs and the problem political situations and how people might not want a landfill in their backyard, or how are people going to pay for that sort of thing. So I've also done a role play simulation on setting up a marine protected area, which was based upon the marine reserve that was set up where I used to do my master's research in Belize, and marine area. And so what I did was I actually got some feedback and commentary from people that were truly the different stakeholders. And the first year I ran this, I actually got my kids to talk to those people. But we're talking about, this was now 10 years ago, and most of those people aren't really available anymore to discuss this with. But I do have a lot of professional friends that I let my students interview when they're going to do a role play and take on the viewpoint or the environmental value system of a particular stakeholder. So I think those activities really give the kids a chance to explore different perspectives on conservation issues. All right, I see that Dr. Pooja wants to say something. Yeah, Dr. Pooja.
Yes. I have a question. I've been hearing that you are using lots of simulations in your lab book. Can these simulations be used or guided or put into the inquiry cycle when they are creating the IES?
I think some of them can. Now, some of the online simulations, they're not really going to be able to do data collection with, because it's, I would say that it's not accurate data, it's simulated data. What I'd rather my students do is use secondary sources of data that they are then going to analyze, and let them use that for an IA purpose.
And that can be done. The secondary data can be used.
Yeah,
for the
absolutely. So there, I will put a link on here. This was on the ESSpedia website, but the International School of Manila has created this absolutely phenomenal video library. And they've got not just video descriptions of all aspects of the IA and other areas of ESS, but they've actually listed a whole bunch of links to secondary databases that students can access when they're considering their IA work. And I'll share that link on one of the resources that have been shared with everybody.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Rowita, did you want to say something else?
Yes, when you were talking about your village, I remembered something that I've read somewhere about the 100 people village. That's a great video that sometimes I use with my kids, especially when we talk about food waste. I'd ask them something like, if there's a village made of 100 people, then what would they be eating? Or what would their genders be, etc. Until we get to the point where how many of them would not find something to drink or find something to eat? And this will drag discussion. It's a great starting point to many different chapters.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes.
Actually, I just want to say I start my class generally with lots of TED Talks. There are good videos on TED Talks also. And students get, even here also, I'm unlucky to have good numbers. My class is also 1 or 2 students only. I generally have maximum. I'm teaching it from 3-4 years. And the maximum is 3 students in a year I got it. So generally we go with lots of TED Talks and it makes students provoke the ideas and all, and then we go with the discussion and we have small labs because we are living in an area which is totally industrial based. Actually it's having lots of industry. So we plan lots of labs on the quality, the flora and all which are in that area. We go with lots of soil testing and all those things. That is what I generally do with my students.
Okay, that's great. Let's see, I think Annie wanted to say something.
I don't know what I did. I just pushed a button and now everything froze. I did not want to say anything.
Oh, okay. No problem. We can definitely keep the discussion going, and it may have frozen because I was trying to screen share again. And we can definitely keep this discussion going, but I know we're getting close to 12 o'clock and some teachers might need to leave. I can hang out a little longer if you all want to continue the discussion and sharing of ideas, but I did want to kind of get back to this with you guys a bit. And I don't know if any of you want to provide some feedback for the session while we continue our discussion. So I would really love to get some feedback about the session from people. And does anybody else want to share another activity that they do? Because I can continue talking about more of my activities. Like another one I do on habitat fragmentation is I found an interesting activity on online, and it listed predators and prey species that are found in the Corcovado National Park in Costa Rica. This is another country I've lived in and another place that I visited. And what I loved is that it talked about the territorial area and what something eats or what something is eaten by. And I actually spent hours, and I probably spent 10 hours revising the information and looking up additional information. And then what I do is I hand out graph paper to groups of students, and I give them background information about the Corcovado National Park, and then talk about infringing habitat loss due to people that live around the park that are moving into the park, and about new roads that are opening up to make more access or more areas accessible to the park, and how that fragments habitats. And so what the kids have to do is using math application and understanding how to make a particular territorial area on the grid on the graph paper. They have to be able to fit the territories of all the animals that live in the park, and show overlapping. They have to remember that some species will overlap because your predators have to be able to access their prey species, and they have to do that before and after the habitat fragmentation has taken place. And what they find is how challenging it is afterwards to get these animals that many of the animals, especially ones that have really large territories like the jaguars, can no longer have those large territories. It doesn't happen, and they have to therefore cross roads, which puts them in danger. So it gets them thinking really critically about that. And all these activities I'm talking about, I have shared with you on the Wakelet resource page. Just so you guys know, because I love doing inquiry activities, I spend hours and hours really trying to refine them. Now, what you'll notice when you go through my resources is that a lot of them don't have, some of these are from the previous syllabus because I've used different activities as I switch schools or I see needs for different cohorts of students. And then some of them, you'll see that on most of them, I don't have the links to the subject guide, but that's something I'm working on now, is getting all of that added to my activities, trying to make those links to the knowledge statements and the subject guides. But on most of them, they are, any instructions and questions are written with the use of IB command terms. Anybody else? I see Madhuri has a hand up.
Yes, besides class activities, especially if you are your school is in a place like Mumbai where it is space starved and you don't have actually much scope to go out and do something, then field trips is a very good idea. So besides class activities, what I have been doing for the past 4 years is it's like a culminating activity, you can say, towards the end of second year, say in October or November. We actually plan a trip somewhere in India, in one of the national parks, where there is a lot of scope for children to explore all that they have been studying in class. It could be transacts, transact laying, quadrats. It could be water sampling. It could be talking to people and finding out their perspective. So it would cover the EVS. So almost all topics get very well covered in a field trip like this. So it is basically a 4-day trip where we go out, we stay there, we interact with farmers, we try to understand the problems that they face, we do soil sampling. So almost everything gets covered in this field trip towards the end of the course before they actually start planning for their IB exams.
That's good. We do something similar, but we do it at the end of their first year to get them in doing the field ecology stuff. Anybody else have something you want to share?
Yeah, I just wanted to say something. This is not purely for ESS, but then when we try to integrate our subject with CAS, because most of it can be very, very meticulously integrated. So when we do our CAS, we did a small activity for about the amount of waste that is generated in the school. In the sense, food waste. So this was a project that IB1 students picked up, and then the first year when they just did it for about a month, and it culminated with the World Food Day. But eventually, because it was something very interesting and children were very conscious about how we were doing it, then we tried doing it over the year, from which means from IB1 to IB2 till the end of IB2, and it went so well that we made our houses in the school, the squads that we have, and then we started giving them marks on the basis of how from each squad the kid was, whatever food was generated. If it was less, they would score more. If the food was wasted, they would score less marks. So it went quite well. So we just tried that students should be very conscious of how the waste, especially related to food, can be reduced in the school premises. This is something we did.
That's great. All right. Anjana, you want to add something?
That's it, Barb. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. It is 12 o'clock, so if anybody has to get going, just one last thing for you guys to do is a quick indication of how useful you found this chat to be. I hope that you enjoyed the interactive components to this, and I really appreciate everybody that shared information during this. It was really very nice. Is there anybody that would like to share any final thoughts or words? All of this stuff, the presentation, the responses, all of that are going to get posted on the Wakelet. And of course, the video from this is going to be on the IB Educator Chat website. So the recorded videos, I think because I broke off and I was kicked out, there's going to come in 2 components. So there'll be 2 videos, the starting part and the ending part. All right. And then if any of you guys want to be able to get a hold of me, you can follow me on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at BA Bilgri, and on Instagram, I'm at Ghana Elephant Goddess. So I hope to see some of you around social media. With anybody with any final questions? Any final comments?
But how do I get these resources? I will have to use this link.
The Wakelet, this link here, the Wakelet, which has been linked, that's where you will get access to those resources.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your time.
The Wakelet link is also on the IB Educator Chat website as well.
Yes, yes. I saw that. Okay. Thanks a lot, Barb. It was great talking to you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. And I appreciate
Are we able to share anywhere?
Sorry, what was that?
Are we able to share resources anywhere? We can't add to your Wakelet, I assume, but
Yes,
is
you
there
can.
any place that we can
I've made that Wakelet collaborative, so you should
Okay.
be able to post things and upload your resources on the Wakelet as well. If you're
We'll
not
just
for
click
some
edit
reason, just drop me an
collection.
email and I'll see if I can problem solve that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. I appreciate your contributions.
Hi, Bob.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Stay
Thank
safe.
you all.
Bob, I wanted to ask something.
Yes.
And that was, if you could just share a little more information about, you made mention of some resource from the International School of Manila.
Yes, I'm going to add that resource to the Wakelet as well. So that way, or I'll probably put that link. I also have a second one, which is web resources, and I will share that with you guys as well. So I'll put it in both places, on the Wakelet and on the resource links for ESS.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Barbara. I'm very grateful. So we'll be in touch.
Yes, definitely. All right. Any other final questions or comments that anybody wants to contribute?
Barbara, hello, Barbara.
Yes.
Like, I want to find how for how long will the Wakelet be? For how long the collaborative? How long are we going to? Sometimes some of these things are there and then they are taken off. So for how long would we?
Yeah, it depends upon how long Aris keeps my account active. If for some reason it looks like it's going to become inactivated, I will move the resources to another collaborative site, and I will post that on Expedia, and I'll use the email links that you guys have shared, and I'll email everybody where to find it if for some reason it's no longer on Wakelet. But it should be accessible, certainly for the rest of this year.
Okay. And I haven't seen, I did your email. I've seen the Facebook, I've seen, but I haven't seen the email.
Oh, so the email is that there's a teacher sign-in list. Okay,
I've seen it. Yeah, okay. I've seen it.
And so my email is the very first one on there.
Thank you very much. I think because I typed mine late, I didn't see yours, so we'll get in touch.
That's okay.
That's good.
Okay, I see there's still 17 people around. Somebody have a question? Nidhi,
yeah,
you?
Bob. Yeah. Yes. It was a wonderful session. You have modeled what is the inquiry looks like in the classroom. It was fabulous. Thank you so much.
I appreciate that.
And I really liked your interactive sessions.
Thank you. Well, if you use Google
Technology.
Slides, look at the add-on Pear Deck. And that's how I was able to make it very interactive.
I quite often use Peer Deck as well. So that's why I was able to appreciate your work there. Well done.
I'm glad. Okay, if there are no other questions or comments, then I'm going to end the session for everybody. Thank you all so much for coming. Bye.
Bye. Take care.
Bye.